Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk about the New Orleans Saints, the LSU Tigers, and the Tulane Green Wave. Got a great panel for you tonight. Joining us on the show is Katherine Terrell. She is the Saints beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and also Jude Young, senior writer for SportsNOLA.com. And thanks so much for being with us. Certainly appreciate you guys coming down, especially under tough circumstances covering the prospective teams right now. But Katherine, we'll take you first. Please tell the folks a little bit about NOLA.com, Times-Picayune, and of course your beat, the Saints beat.
As you said, I cover the Saints for the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. This is my second year doing that full time. A little bit different than last year. I actually started covering the Saints in 2012.
Right.
So every year has been different, but right now they're certainly struggling a little bit, to say the least.
Jude, how about yourself? SportsNOLA.com doing a great job, and of course your radio show at WGSO.
Well, we're in our 6th year now of this independently owned website trying to cover sports around the state, and we're really proud of our efforts, our analysis, and our high school coverage in particular this time of the year. We encourage everybody to check out on Friday nights our statewide scoreboard. There's only one place to get all of the scores in the LHSA every Friday night, first, and that's SportsNOLA.com, and we're really proud of that effort and some great analysts across the board, pro, college, and in recruiting as well.
Yeah, and of course your radio show is
the Jude Young Show on Tuesday and Wednesday nights from 6 to 7 on WGSO 990 AM.
And you're also obviously participating in Kenny Trahan's prep football report as well.
Right, exactly. Friday night, starting with the Countdown Show at 6 o'clock, and it's on a statewide network, now 9 stations strong, and we take you all the way to midnight with a simulcast of Friday Night Football from Ed Daniels and company.
Yeah, do a great job. Well, guys, let's get into it. 866-3200. Your phone calls are always welcome. Your comments, your questions about the New Orleans Saints as we kick it off. And to say that the Cowboys' loss was embarrassing would be an understatement. Some were saying the worst half of football in the Peyton era. I guess it's turned about as fair play because the Cowboys got embarrassed last year on national television. Obviously, the Saints got embarrassed this year on national television. But I got to tell you right now, the coaching, the team play to me was atrocious. For a team that had so much hype in the offseason, I'm a victim of it. I was there hyping them as well. The first quarter of the season, this may be the most undisciplined and fundamentally deficient team that I've seen in the Peyton era. We'll take you first, Katherine. First of all, again, your thoughts on just how this first quarter has gone.
Well, if you say Peyton era, I guess you're not counting 2012.
No, I'm going to leave that one out.
That may have been worse.
Yes.
That may have been worse. But that Cowboys game, I asked Peyton, I said, is this the worst loss you've ever had, or one of them? He may have misunderstood the question because he said playoff losses are always worse, yes. But I think it's up there. you might count that Colts game a few years back. I think that final score was something along the lines of 41-7. That's close. That's comparable. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in this game, and that game, sorry, and this one was almost as bad. Special teams looked awful. They can't get on their kicker to make a simple kick. They can't return the ball. They can't tackle. Their defense they can't get off the field on third down. Their offense is hit or miss. So
are you reading my show sheet?
Yeah. I mean, like I could just go on for 2 pages probably. And yet they're still not a bad football team. So it's just strange.
Right, it is. Jude, what can you add? I mean, your thoughts coming into this season? Tremendous amount of accolades. Some said this was a Super Bowl team. They haven't lived up to the billing.
We will dive into the psychology of this team right now, which is part of the equation, I think. But looking at what's happened so far, there were weaknesses that we knew about, or potential weaknesses, and they've come to the forefront, certainly in the secondary at cornerback. We wondered about perhaps depth on the offensive line. That's starting to be tested. Katherine mentioned the kicking situation. That's still iffy at best. But we're seeing new weaknesses that we didn't expect, starting with the defensive line. I don't think you can say enough about how they've underperformed. And with the issues in the back of the defense, that line is filled with young players. You can't say it's age that's an issue there. It's certainly not. But guys that were supposed to take the next step forward across the board haven't done so. And if they don't start generating more of a pass rush, she mentioned not getting off the field on third downs, they're certainly not going to do that and make that change without generating a pass rush.
You know, guys, it starts with Sean Payton. He's always, again, said that the buck stops with him really throughout the whole organization. I mean, you could talk about him being the head coach, but he is the face of the entire organization. This was a dramatic change in this organization when he came in and took over and, did the Payton way. Never in his tenure of watching this guy coach here in New Orleans have I seen him so emotionless on the sidelines, the lack of drive, the lack of fire. Normally, guys are getting chewed out, coaches and players, if they make an error coming to the sidelines. It didn't matter. He takes no prisoners. We did not see the wrath of Payton on Sunday night. Katherine, I'll take you first. Can you put into words what may be happening? There are rumors out there that there is a split within the board of directors. Again, at this point, that is rumor. Whether that affects him or not in terms of coaching, who knows? But this just didn't seem like the same Sean Payton.
Yeah, it's hard to take too much from that. I did kind of watch the sidelines a couple of times, and I would notice sometimes Rob Ryan would be all the way on the other side of the field. Although he did move back close to Payton after Brees threw an interception, maybe kind of thinking it's not my fault this time. No, I didn't see that. But I guess you don't always catch everything. It is strange. Maybe, as we were talking earlier, maybe he was just resigned in the middle of the game that this is one of those games that is not going to go my way. Kind of strange for Payton to accept that attitude. And I guess it's something to look at for the next game. These two games ahead are going to determine how the course of their entire season is going to go and whether they can turn it around.
Jude, as a lifelong New Orleanian, you've seen a lot of these teams. You've covered Payton since he's been here. What's your thoughts on what's going on with the head coach? Because he does set the tone for the team.
Well, I think it's important to note that he's been here a while now. You go back to 2006, so his era has gotten to the point where sometimes yelling and screaming isn't the best option. You can lose your team. Now, we may be wondering if he has his finger on the pulse of this team right now, but I think he was wise just to accept what was going on the field. That game was really lost before opening kickoff. They weren't ready to play. Dallas was motivated about that loss last year. They wanted revenge. Maybe the Saints were thinking about last year and expecting it to be a lot easier than it turned out to be. I think Sean Payton made the right move, not getting crazy on the sidelines. And people have made crossover comparisons to the Patriots. And there's a team that's also led by a guy who's been there a while. Belichick didn't lose it on Monday night when his team was getting blown out the water. He kept his cool. It's a long season, and you don't want to lose your team in week 4.
A lot of speculation. I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped on the street, how many times I've been asked. I know you guys the same thing. What's wrong with this team? A lot of the fans want to look toward Greenbrier and say, look, this was a soft camp. This was a team that lost a tremendous amount of leadership. You go back, and I mentioned on this program and on my radio show, 7 players remain on the offensive side of the ball from the 2009 Super Bowl team. There are none, 0 on the defensive side of the ball. Katherine, you were at camp. You saw these guys work out every single day. Was this a soft camp? Can you blame the lavish conditions of Greenbrier and the pink walls in the bedrooms on the Saints' demise?
Oh, I really don't think so. What people don't really understand is that they want to point to Millsaps and say, oh, well, when Sean got here, he took him through the hardest training camp they've ever had. Well, that's not possible anymore. There's no team in the NFL that can do it thanks to the new CBA. So really, the main difference you're looking at is players slogging through this heat, essentially, which they didn't have. And you can make an argument either way, but a lot of players will tell you we don't learn when all we can think about is the heat. Our bodies feel awful, and that's what Bree said the other day. If you want to make an argument, you can argue that their mindset was not in the right place once they stepped foot there. And maybe, but I wouldn't say that the training camp wasn't as tough as normal. I mean, I think it was just as tough as it was in Metairie. They just weren't in 105-degree weather.
Right.
But
Jude?
Mindset, that's the word.
Yeah, it could be that.
I don't think they had an issue with working hard enough. I
Yeah.
think the weather conditions helped their work during the preseason. The issue is, what is the mindset? I spoke to you before the show and I said entitlement. I'm not so sure that this team didn't have expectations that they just had to get to January and they were going to be competing for a Super Bowl. That was just going to happen. And perhaps the mindset is what's cost them here. They have a serious issue winning on the road. What we've seen in 3 road games is they haven't done anything to change that perception. And perhaps now it's seeping into their minds. Will that be what motivates them? I don't know, but even in their one victory at home, they went up 13-0, and it looked like they shut down mentally and emotionally a little bit and let the Vikings hang around. If not for the Captain Munnerlyn late hit, which immediately the Saints responded to by driving down the field and essentially putting the game away, who knows? Who knows what would have happened in that game? This is a team that hasn't put together close to a full 60 minutes yet.
I would agree with both you guys. Larry is in Kenner. Larry called us at 866-3200. Larry, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, thank y'all for taking my call,
Hey, Larry,
man.
thanks
I love
for calling.
your show.
Thank you.
If I had to pick a coach in the Football League to be Sean Payton to coach my team, I think he's got it going. It's that 1-3. That 1-3 ain't nothing. We're gonna bounce back like Drew said, and we're gonna take it up and go to the Super Bowl again this year. If you're a Who Dat fan, don't jump off the wagon. Follow me to the Super Bowl. We're going.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for the phone call. 866-3200. The biggest question is the defense. What happened to this defense? You can't trust the defense now with a lead. You can't trust the defense without a lead. They seem to have a tough time defending the pass, putting a pass rush on the passer. I mentioned earlier, I saw Junior Gillette going against the offensive tackle of the Dallas Cowboys at one point, and the Cowboy tackle drove him into the ground. I thought he was reaching for one of those life alert buttons. I'm falling and I can't get up because he was just laying there. Okay, this is not the same Junior Gillette from last year. This is not the same Cam Jordan from last year. This is not the same interior of the defensive line from last year. These guys should have a second year under their belt in this system. This should be easy to know where you're going to be. Sean Payton said this week they're having trouble getting aligned correctly. That should not be happening in the second year of a system. Katherine, can you put your finger on what's going on with this defense?
Well, I think one of the main issues I've said over and over again is that you can't ship out a lot of veteran guys and then add a guy like Jarvis Byrd and think, well, that's the solution. He's very talented, of course, but Jonathan Vilma commanded that locker room, and so did Roman Harper, and so did Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins was the guy who would give these inspiring pregame speeches, and no one does that anymore. I talked to some of the players, and they said that that's not an issue, but I tend to think that it has to be. When you lose that many leaders on the defensive side of the ball, it changes things. Now you've got a lot of very young guys. Some, I think, like you said, they might have a little bit of sense of entitlement. They were so good last year. Why wouldn't they be good this year? And I think that, it could be a leadership problem. You don't see that problem on the offensive side of the ball. They've got a lot of leaders.
Yes. Then they have 7 holdovers from a Super Bowl year.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And it starts with Drew Brees. As long as he's around, there'll be leadership on offense. But on defense, Katherine hit the nail on the head. All of those guys are gone. Throw Will Smith into the mix. Is there a vocal
Jabari
leader?
Greer,
Right,
too.
Jabari Greer. Is there a vocal leader on this defense?
There's really not. I mean,
No.
I talked to them and I've said, who's the vocal leader, and they all
Closest
say we're
thing is
not.
maybe Curtis Lofton, huh?
Curtis Lofton is, yes, he probably is the leader of that defense. But when you look at the secondary specifically, there's not really a guy in there that kind of is the glue that holds that group together. I think it used to be Jenkins and Greer, and they're both gone, and now I don't want to say it's a free-for-all, but you kind of get that sense when they're on the field.
But let's not say that they don't have lunch pail guys, that they don't have hard workers, that they don't have true professionals.
Right.
They do. But when you talk about the mix that motivates you day in, day out, and through a season, I think the vocal leadership issue has to come up. Maybe a Kenny Vaccaro could have filled that role, but we're seeing a straight-up sophomore slump from him.
Yes.
And the Saints did not intend for him to have to play that slot coverage role. That's why they were going with 2 safeties early in the year. He's getting burnt. So it's hard for him to be vocal when he's down on himself. He has to be because he's struggling so much. So if you don't have anybody that can really lift up the whole team, both with their play and with their words, sometimes it can be a process that continues without any change.
Back to the phone lines we go. Harris is in Slidell. Harris, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric, thanks for taking
Harris,
my call.
Thank you for calling.
Look, I was calling. I had high hopes this year for 2 people in particular, and I was calling to see about their development, Akeem Hicks and Stanley Jean-Baptiste. Can you guys shed some light on that for me, please?
Thank you, Harris, for the phone call. Katherine, Akeem Hicks is in a little bit of a slump here. I mean, he was expected to have a Pro Bowl year.
Well, so was Junior Gillette, and so was Cam Jordan. And, they always say we work as a unit. And as a unit, they've kind of got a solid D- going there. They're just not working together, and he's just kind of faded into obscurity. You don't ever really hear his name. You don't really see him make big plays. Sometimes he's almost there, and I don't know what the issue is. But with Baptiste, that's a whole new story.
Right.
I think that they just consider this a redshirt year for him.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I don't think he's ready to go at all because he'd be on the field.
Exactly.
Your thoughts on both players?
Well, starting with Hicks, he's a guy, he's such a big presence. He is a physical marvel, but I think the issue that we've seen was what the concern was going back to when he was a rookie, technique. He plays too upright, and you can see that. And he's allowing himself to be stonewalled, and he's not able to be effective as a pass rusher. I don't think he's done that bad of a job in early downs. The Saints haven't been able to get off the field in 3rd down. And in particular, that middle pass rush, they are not pushing the pocket on people, nor are they containing quarterbacks when they try to buy time. So, you look at a guy like Hicks, he needs to start getting better because he's got to be one of the key answers up front as far as Jean-Baptiste goes. Let's face it, you start scratching your head and saying a 2nd-round pick on a project, and then you miss that badly on the players you had, the veterans on your roster. Champ Bailey can't play. Patrick Robinson falls apart. You really have to point your finger at Mickey Loomis and say, what were you thinking?
Right. No, I agree with you on that, Jude. And let me say, in a year, and I've said this on this program, I've said it on the radio show, in a year where there were expectations of a championship, knowing this is not a surprise, you saw what happened when Jabari Greer went out last year. You knew that you had to fill that 2nd corner position. You knew that Corey White was a better slot guy. You know what you had in Patrick Robinson, even though you tried to force feed him, and then trying to get Champ Bailey on fumes and hoping you could squeeze one more year out of him. No, that was a huge miss, and it's put a tremendous amount of pressure on this defense. But gosh, it starts up front. If they had any semblance of a pass rush, we really wouldn't be talking about the back end.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think you still would be, but that is a problem that started in March. They didn't address their cornerback issues through free agency. Like you said, it was a known issue. When Keenan Lewis went down, the 2 people that went in for him were Rod Sweeting and Trevin Wade, and it did not go well. They almost lost to the Eagles because of that. The whole game changed. So they take Jean-Baptiste in the 2nd round. He was actually the only cornerback taken in the 2nd round. When you had a couple of good corners at the end of the 1st round, and suddenly you pay Bird because you want to win now, but then you get a project in the 2nd round, you have no cornerback depth. If Keenan Lewis goes down,
they're in trouble.
but yes, it always starts up front, and they're getting no help from up front. That just makes them look worse. So when you have a suspect secondary, it's just like the problem just trickles down and just keeps getting worse
and
and worse.
the pass rushing thing is probably the biggest head scratcher here because they were able to put pressure on the passer last year, in some cases with 4 down linemen.
Right.
And I think you mentioned, again, Akeem Hicks, the inability to be able to put pressure up the middle. It's allowing quarterbacks to escape. A lot of times in the NFL now, they're fanning defensive ends out. And again, with the hope that, and the Saints were able in a lot of cases to win those one-on-one battles with Gillette and Jordan last year. They're not doing that. You mentioned a little bit earlier, they are kind of a half a step behind right now. They're almost getting there, but they're not getting there. And again, that's to me where it starts. Guys, from a pass rushing standpoint, can you put your finger on what's going on?
The Dallas game was really hard to watch if you're a Saints fan hoping for a turnaround because Cam Jordan was double teamed in every obvious passing situation. And that meant one-on-one matchups for everybody else up front. Nobody was winning those matchups. Junior Gillette, you mentioned him having a good year last year. 12 sacks, but only 2 on the road. He hasn't been a productive road player. Hicks's problems. John Jenkins, a guy who would help take up blockers because of the injury in the offseason, he's not available. The worry about him was, can he stay in shape? Can he be ready to play because of his weight? The injury obviously threw him off schedule. So you have major issues with the guys who are available and one that you expected to be there who's not.
Meanwhile, Tom Johnson is playing very, very well for the Minnesota Vikings.
As is almost every free agent the Saints let go.
Isn't it? It's amazing.
Murphy's
isn't it?
Law, yeah.
I think it's a grain of salt. From Harper, who's playing well in the box for Carolina.
Yes, at
in
that
the
time,
box,
but
okay.
yes.
To Jenkins with 3 picks now. Sproles tears your heart out every time you see him take a screen, or especially with the Saints having the problems with the special teams, and we'll get to that. No, it seems like everyone they've let go, they're contributing to the team they're with now.
Yeah, and you know what? The Jenkins issue that he mentioned is very strange. They took almost everybody to the Dallas game, and I mean everybody. The guys on IR, the inactive guys, and Jenkins suddenly was a last-minute scratch off the travel list. I mean, that's just strange.
Yes.
Any way you put it, and I don't know what happened.
It seems like it's more than just an injury, honestly.
It seems like that.
Right.
It's
Even though they
very
have been
strange.
non-committal on any type of internal suspension. But I've heard the rumors as well. This is more than just an injury. You know.
Yeah.
So again, that's a great point. DJ is in New Orleans East. DJ, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Good evening, everyone.
DJ?
I was wondering, I talked with you, Eric, on your radio show, and the question I had at that time was about the shoddy tackling. And I was wondering if you guys might have any insight on what they could do to alleviate that problem, and I'll hang up and listen.
DJ?
Well, they just got to keep working on their fundamentals. That's what they keep repeating. I think maybe part of the problem is this turnover thing is in their head now. They think too much about it because it's been harped on since the middle of last season, and so now they think about it and they blame us. They blame the media for it. But anyway, so they're thinking about it. They're not making tackles.
Nobody's tackling out there that holds a pen in their hand or a
I
microphone.
know. We've been told it's our fault for talking about it too much, but. What can you say?
I think it's important to note that last year this team was about as good as there was in the league and not missing tackles.
Yes.
And they weren't creating turnovers. So you hear that for the whole offseason, but you also change your approach in practice. You probably see the emphasis going more towards what we saw under Greg Williams, tackling the ball, trying to create, strip, pick it up and go. The problem is that's affecting their technique and they're missing tackles. Right. Remember, there were a couple of runs, one particular by DeMarco Murray, and he's not a power back. He's having an outstanding season, but he looked like he was doing his impression of Marshawn Lynch running through the Saints on one particular play. That's because everybody was tackling the football and not the man. Once you start doing that, there's got to be a combination of both, and we're seeing that technique breakdown out of desperation at this point.
You know, I agree with both you guys. I'll say this. What you're not seeing is populating the ball. You can strip and create turnovers if you populate the ball. It is your job, fundamentally sound, to go in and make that tackle. And if somehow, some way, you've got teammates that are going to come populate the ball, then you worry about the strip. Then you worry about that. They look like they're playing flag football out there at times. They really do. I mean, they're going for the flag instead of going for the man. And maybe the biggest culprit is this is Kenny Vaccaro, who was the surest tackler on this team last year.
He was. He barely missed any tackles all season, and then suddenly you get to Atlanta, and he's missing tackles left and right. He missed 6 of them. I don't think Vaccaro's tackling has been really a problem since then. I mean, or at least not such a glaring problem. But, yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that's supposed to force turnovers, and he's not. Bird certainly isn't.
Right.
So
Bird taking bad angles. I mean, multiple times. He had some big hits in the game against Dallas, but multiple times taking bad angles, and again being completely out of a play.
And you have to ask the question of how they're using him versus why he was so successful in Buffalo. I think most of us were scratching our heads wondering why you're playing an impact free agent 20, 30 yards off the ball at the snap. Was that the place he was always playing in Buffalo? I don't know. I haven't gone back and looked at that film, but he has been out of position. You know that the back surgery in the offseason delayed his development with a new team in a new system, and it's all come to a head, and he hasn't been the playmaker that you've expected. But he is a talented pro, and you have to believe that he'll turn things around. You have much more confidence in that than what Vaccaro is going through right now.
No doubt. Marie is in New Orleans. Marie, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hi, I'm just calling to, first of all, to congratulate Jude, who is my grandson, and tell him how proud we are, his grandpa and I, of the good job he's doing. And we've been Saints fans since the first run back of the kickoff in Tulane Stadium, and we're still Saints fans. We raised our kids to be Saints fans. We have Saints fans all over the country because of that, and I'd just like to say, stay optimistic, stay positive, go Saints. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Jude, I'll let you take that since that was a member of your family.
Well, first of all, love you guys, no question about that. And I think that attitude is important. Just listening to it, I went into the analyst mode again. And the important thing to remember, and we're going to get to LSU in a moment, this isn't a fan base. Who Dat Nation doesn't turn on their team.
Right.
They're going to be strong and vocal and hoping for a turnaround starting Sunday. And I think that's important and something the players can feed off of. But of course, winning at home hasn't been a problem. So this should be a momentum gaining contest for them this weekend going into the bye.
Marie, going back to 1967, like I went back to 1967, the expectations are much different than the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even the early 90s.
Right.
I mean, you look at this team, the expectations year in, year out now is Super Bowl championships, and if you're not living up to that pedigree, it's a problem.
Oh, same with LSU, yes.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as we were talking before the show, under Sean Payton, the Saints they've never just collapsed. If they have a bad season, it's a 8-8 season or 7-9. It's never a 2-14 season.
Right.
So yeah, now a bad season for Saints fans would be not making the playoffs. So you could go 10-6 and it can still be a bad season. So expectations are so high.
It's helping the Saints right now that the NFC South is so bad.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, 8-8 could win that division right now. So having that out there, Saints fans are keeping their optimism a little bit more than they would have if they were playing in the NFC West.
Well, it's the only thing keeping guys from jumping off the Mississippi Bridge right now. I mean, literally. I mean, you know, the fan base bought into, like all of us did, a lot of us did in the media. I'm not saying all, but a lot of us did, that felt like this team was primed after last year being the number 4 defense, reloading on offense, Brandon Cooks coming in, hoping that Breeze would stay healthy, that they would be looking at a championship. And look, it's not over. It's the first quarter of the season. But at the same time, you can't ignore what you're seeing here. Fundamental breakdowns, the inability to tackle, self-inflicted wounds, a lack of passion from the head coach. Just too many mistakes right now. And more than anything else, they got to get into a game where they can beat the man in front of them. The biggest problem they have right now is collectively they're getting beat by the man in front of them.
I agree, and that's what Curtis Lofton said. He said, our job is to beat the guy in front of us. You can't sit here and blame another person or blame your teammate for what you've done wrong. If each individual plays better, then they're gonna win. I mean, it's that simple. And they're sure lucky they're home this week, though. That's got to help. I mean, they beat Tampa Bay 42-17 last year, so that might be in their heads this week as they're heading towards that game.
Hopefully not along the lines of what Jude talked about. Hopefully it won't be in their heads thinking they can just roll the ball out there and win one, because this team's got to come out with some fire on Sunday. Jude, what can you add?
And Catherine's absolutely right. This team's not the type of team. She's around them every day. They're not going to turn on one another. They're all looking in the mirror wondering, what am I not doing to help this team win? You get that vibe from this group. So I assume they're going to come out and work hard on Sunday. But will they find that passion and that belief that, hey, you're now the hunter? I think they thought that they were the hunted, but they were, and I hate to bring up the word entitled again, but they were just going to take care of business, win double-digit games, and compete for a Super Bowl. Now can they change the mindset and become a hungry team again? That's the biggest question for the rest of the season, and I'd like to see a hungry team against Tampa Bay, that if they jump out early, try to bury them. Show me a 42-17 score and try to build off of that week to week.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night with our live broadcast, 6 p.m. right here on WLAE-TV. On Friday nights, WLAE-TV and Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette is where you can catch Inside New Orleans Sports. It happens at 10 o'clock each and every Friday night. We'll take a quick pause to allow our underwriters to be able to tell you a little bit about themselves. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our panel tonight, Katherine Terrell of NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and also Jude Young of SportsNOLA.com and WGSO Radio. Guys, we were talking a little bit in the break about it. One thing we have not seen on the defensive side of the ball is a tremendous amount of adjustments from Coach Ryan. Rob Ryan last year was a master at adjusting on the fly, much like we got accustomed to seeing Greg Williams do in his first couple years here, masking deficiencies, making a move when necessary. We have not seen a lot of that. Katherine, any rhyme or reason to that?
Well, for one thing, I think Ryan had to scale back his defense a little bit because it was too complicated for the players. They said they had to simplify some of the checks and things like that, and maybe he just couldn't make the adjustments because it had gotten too complicated. Now, he has a reputation of his systems being too complicated. That's why Jerry Jones said he fired him.
Yes.
And I'm sure that could have just been an excuse, but it was something talked about in Dallas a lot, and maybe that's the thing. You can't just add more to the playbook and necessarily expect the defense to be able to pick it all up.
I'll defend Rob Ryan. I think he has made adjustments. After the first two games, we saw the change back to more of that three safety base.
That's
He's trying to get his best personnel on the field. They haven't performed well. We've talked about technique. We've talked about guys up front not getting to the quarterback. You can defend Rob Ryan to say that he has tried to make the changes. He's blitzed more than he did last year and wants to, and that's come along later in games in the first couple and now earlier in games. But let's look at the problem. People aren't winning their one-on-one matchups up front, and when they're bringing extra people, they're still not getting there. Lofton, Hawthorne when he's healthy, Harrelson, these aren't very good blitz linebackers. Their scouting report will tell you that. You know that they're not adept at doing that. So you're trying to fit square pegs into round holes when your defense was supposed to be built upon that front three plus Galette generating pressure like we saw last year. It's not happening, and with the big hole at cornerback, it's become a nightmare.
I'll agree with you, Jude. For those that wanted to make Rob Ryan king of Mardi Gras last year, he didn't quit. He didn't all of a sudden forget how to coach in the NFL.
Exactly.
Okay, the bottom line is the players are not performing. They're not beating the guy across from them. And again, it's reflecting on the coach, but it's not the coach. But in-game adjustments, he's been able to do that in the past. You haven't seen a lot, and maybe it is, again, because of trying to fill that hole, trying to mask that deficiency at the cornerback position, and maybe having Jarvis Byrd, who's still kind of raw when it comes to this system. Let's shift gears and talk about the special teams that have been anything but special. I mentioned this to the crew when we were talking a little bit earlier, and I mentioned on the radio show. You know, normally if Peyton wants to set an example, he'll fire someone,
right.
Okay? I was fully expecting that Shane Graham was going to be cut on Monday. Miss an extra point, miss a field goal. He's been inconsistent throughout his career. It was a very close race between him and Dempke on who was going to get the place-kicking job to begin with. I'm just a little bit surprised that they've allowed his inconsistency to linger one more week.
I am a bit surprised about that, too. I was wondering if they're even going to bring in kickers on Tuesday to try out, and I haven't heard anything about that, which is interesting. I think maybe they did take a look at kickers and just their thought was that there were no better kickers out there. It doesn't always work to cut a kicker and bring another one in. Or maybe, honestly, maybe Shane Graham is just at the bottom of their problems list.
Right.
And it's just something they're getting to after they fix everything else.
Right.
Shane Graham might be a fortunate character to look at how the schedule played out. If they didn't have a bye after this Sunday, maybe he's unemployed now. Maybe he's getting one more game. Hey, if he goes out there and does his job, they might still look at kickers. They might still take another look at a Dempke and whoever else is out there and see what they may need. Because you remember when Garrett Hartley started going downhill, they looked at kickers, but they didn't automatically make a move. This could be a process where even if Graham kicks well on Sunday, they might look at some kickers because they'll have some time with the bye.
But Hartley had history.
Yeah.
He made two of the biggest kicks in the history of the organization. He pretty much won a Super Bowl for them, got him out of the NFC Championship into the Super Bowl, and again played well in the Super Bowl. Maybe a little more rope for a guy like Hartley.
Right.
Not a lot of rope for a guy that has been a journeyman throughout his career in Graham.
Well, honestly, the Saints can be almost too loyal sometimes. They kept Will Smith along, even though everyone thought it wasn't going to fit. They kept Vilma and they kept Harper. People thought they kept a lot of players maybe a year too long, and the same thing with Hartley. It's why the Darren Sproles issue doesn't really make sense, because the Saints haven't really made a habit of treating their players badly. If anything,
and elaborate on that for the audience, because that was an article that came out today. Sproles is upset with the Saints. He feels he was disrespected by the Saints.
Yeah, he and his wife went on an Instagram rant about that months ago. Essentially, Sproles had been informed face-to-face, I think, or at least over the phone by Peyton that he was going to be cut, and then I think things happened very quickly. He ended up getting traded. He found out on Twitter, and he was asked about it today, and he said he doesn't talk to anyone at the Saints anymore. He felt disrespected. He couldn't believe that's how he found out, and he's a little bit fiery today.
He's a little sensitive because, again, he's made millions of dollars with playing the NFL game, made good money with the Saints. He didn't show the burst that he's showing right now at Philly. Last year, he looked like a descending player. He was able to go to an offense that again, was the best fit for him. As I mentioned before we came on the air, they could have sent him to Oakland, okay? And not just that, he was able to parlay that into an extension.
Motivation. We talk about the Saints and what's their motivation, where's their hunger. That's the best thing that could have happened to Sproles. He went to a good team that knows how to use him, and he's got something to prove. He felt he was disrespected when he left San Diego. Steve Smith in Baltimore felt like the Panthers have disrespected him. Guys that are competitive, pros, at the top of their field, that's how they're supposed to react to things. I think it's much ado about nothing, and the Saints treated him well. If there were any miscommunications at the very end during the offseason, so be it. I'm sure Sproles, once he retires, will come back to New Orleans and be part of the Saints family in some way, or at least when he comes to town. I don't think that's a big issue at all.
The return game has been non-existent. Cooks has been a disappointment at this point, kind of learning the NFL game in terms of punt returns. You're giving up with Cadet back there. I mean, you're just giving up at this point. I mean, there's been a lot of talk on this program, my radio show, about maybe using Joe Morgan. Put somebody back there that can be a game breaker. Cadet has looked good against fourth-string guys in the preseason, in the fourth quarter, running the kicks back when these guys are not even in the NFL anymore. they seem to be leaving yards on the table by not addressing the return game. Katherine, your thoughts on, can they turn this around? Will we see Joe Morgan? What's the situation with Brandon Cooks? Because that's not the same Brandon Cooks we saw at Oregon State in terms of returning punts.
Well, for one thing, they lead the NFL in fair catches. What they keep doing is whenever they have the worst starting field position in the NFL to start with. They're consistently close to their own end zone, and when that happens, they trot Jairus Byrd out there to fair catch it. I'm almost positive he's been told, don't return it, for obvious reasons. They pay him $9 million a year.
And he had a back injury.
Exactly. So you're already conceding that. Maybe they don't trust Cooks in that situation not to fumble the ball, but you're just giving up any chance at a punt return. And even when they do return it, they only average 2.5 yards per return, which is the second worst in the NFL.
They were at negative punt return last week, right? Before last week's game?
Yeah, it's been so bad. Think about it. She mentions field position, worst in the league. Their average starting field position for the season is their own 21-yard line. They have not started one drive this year in opposing territory.
Amazing.
If your defense isn't getting off the field on third down, and you couple that with a special teams that's giving you zilch in the return game, which isn't new, while we talk about Darren Sproles, he's returning a punt for a touchdown for a team that's also blocking a punt for a touchdown. The Saints continue to do nothing. It's more than the return man. There's 11 guys on the field.
Right. I'll add a caveat to that, not turning the ball over and giving the offense a short field as well.
Right.
Now, it's been really frustrating. Offensively, Drew Brees has been a great player for this team and is still a great player for this team. But if you look at the tail of the tape here, he has set the tone on the road when he turns the ball over. They've been able to overcome fumbles from players. When Brees has multiple interceptions or throws interceptions on the road, it's hard for them to overcome that. It's tough for them really to recover. Your thoughts on how Brees has played so far this season? And, again, to me, it's got to be maybe a little bit more cautious with the football on the road, because we've seen this happen over and over again. When he throws an interception, it's tough for them to come back.
He's done it. It seems like almost every single road game for a very long time now.
It really does.
When he threw an interception against the Cowboys in the press box, we were like, oh, okay, well, we were waiting for that. I mean, we knew it was going to happen because it always happens. It's not just him. The Saints, I think actually had a nice drive going, and then Jimmy Graham fumbled the ball. But you're right. As the leader of this team, Brees, of all people, needs to not press and make better decisions on the road. He knows that. But yet, you look at the turnover in Cleveland, the turnover against the Cowboys. I mean, at that point, maybe it's better just to be more cautious. I don't know. Down that much against the Cowboys, maybe he tried to force it.
I think you have to throw out that particular situation. He threw 44 passes. They ran, 15?
And he looks good and on some of them.
With that kind of lack of balance, you're going to throw an interception at some point when you're playing from behind. But you mentioned the Clevelands. That turnover might be a microcosm of the mindset of Sean Payton. All of these people that want to say Drew Brees is declining.
Which I don't believe.
It's so ridiculous. That's not the issue. He may not be at his very peak, but he's an elite quarterback. The issue is, think about that situation in Cleveland. I think it was another one of Mark Ingram's long runs in that game, followed up by spread the field, we're going to throw the ball on first down. If Sean Payton would realize when this team's on the road, especially this season when they run the ball so well, that he needs to try to have balance at the least and maybe go for a ratio where he runs the ball more than he throws it. That may be anathema to Sean Payton. I don't know, but it would be a good idea. It helps your defense because it helps your time of possession, and you're much more likely not to turn over the ball when you're running it.
And one of the, I guess, mind-boggling things about Sunday night at Dallas was Pierre Thomas gets 4 touches. 4 touches for a guy that, again, is the best all-around running back on this team.
Cadet was the third down back essentially in that game. We don't know, even though he wasn't on the injury report, if there was some sort of issue there that wasn't listed. Usually you see that, Katherine. I don't know.
Katherine, didn't Payton say something about there was a situation where they were in a hurry up, and I didn't buy it.
Is there a better
package for Cadet? Is what he said.
Is there a better receiving back and somebody who can make somebody miss in the open field in this league than Pierre Thomas at that role? That's why I thought it was brilliant to see see Sproles go and move Thomas into that role full time. But now we're seeing Cadet. Cadet's not even on the same plane of existence in talent.
Amen.
And he
with
also
Pierre
took
Thomas.
out his teammate and kneed him in the head and gave him a concussion.
The most important offensive line. Yeah.
Right. Who's played honestly, he's played very well. Terrell Olmsted.
Oh, he's great. He's going to be a
I
great
give Bryce
player.
Harris credit, by the way.
So do I.
Because he pass blocked in that situation
Yes.
well. I don't know why Sean Payton continued to try to run the ball left,
Right.
thinking Armstead was still out there. But Harris, that was one of my biggest concerns going into the season. If he can play like that when needed in a dire situation that they faced there, then he's going to be good enough as a backup.
I agree with you, Jude. He did play well when the Saints passed, but in the running game, as has been his MO, he leaves a lot to be desired. He's just not the same player when you're running the football, and I'm talking about Bryce Harris.
Right.
Armstead has given them just a tremendous amount of boost when you talk about what he's been able to do in the passing game and getting out on those runs, man. I mean, it's like having a tight end that's the size of a tackle, the way he gets out on the running game and basically blocks downfield.
He is obviously the most athletic person on that offensive
Yes.
line. That was a great decision by Sean Payton last year to essentially boot Charles Brown out and just throw the rookie to the wolves. He struggled against Carolina, and then after that, he's been great ever since. And that's a player I've said for a while that is going to be a great player for the Saints for a long time.
Right. But overall, the offensive line, I talked about it in this program a couple weeks ago. They looked physical with Goodwin in the middle. They were running the ball effectively for the most part. They were pass blocking well for Drew Brees, but they've been a little leaky lately. They've been a little shaky. I mean, Brees is kind of running for his life again. Jude, your thoughts overall on this offensive line? Obviously, Goodwin with a high ankle sprain. Now he's got a problem with his
He's
shoulder.
listed with a neck injury.
Neck injury. So, I mean,
is new.
he's hurting a little bit. Armstead should be back from the concussion-related symptoms, but, they've been a little porous at times.
Goodwin's in his mid-30s. Jari Evans is 31. Ben Grubbs is 30. And they've shown wear and tear in the last couple of years. So you wonder how they're going to make it through a 16-game season, taking the beating that you do in the interior of a line. So it does make you wonder, is it easier for your offensive linemen if you decide you're going to run the football more, so they're playing downhill as opposed to having physical 300-plus pounders coming at them? I think for the game plan and for this team, hoping they can stay healthy, I'd like to see them run the ball more. And if Goodwin's not 100%, and one injury is leading to another at this point, Tim Lolito needs to be out there. I'd rather take a guy who's 80% of Goodwin healthy than Goodwin that banged up. And you have to see if he can play anyway.
Right. Your thoughts on Jude's comments?
I do agree. I was very surprised that they played Goodwin. I thought it was a mistake. I thought you don't rush a guy in his mid-30s back with a high ankle sprain. That's just going to lead to another problem. And actually, when he didn't practice the other day, I thought he'd re-sprained the ankle. But I guess now it's a neck injury, which is totally unrelated if that's the case. But if the competition was that close, then they should be okay with Lolito.
I'll say this, though. I don't think the competition was really that close.
I don't really either, but I think that Lolito is a solid player.
Right, because
solid enough.
I think Goodwin's just that good even at his age.
Right.
Because, Rick Gailey of Sports NOLA pointed out, watch his knee bend. It's amazing how flexible he still is. And you're talking about the center position. Be able to get low and play that spot is essential. He has that when healthy. So that was a great upgrade over Brian De La Puente from last year. But right now, it doesn't look like it is. Give him time to rest. I'd like to see Lolito play this Sunday and give Goodwin a rest through the bye.
They may have to. One of the more disappointing parts of this team on the offensive side of the ball is to play the wide receiving core. Everybody can talk about the lack of deep threat. I mean, they got some speed on this team. You're talking about Cooks, Stills, Joe Morgan, Robert Meacham, all guys that can run. They still can't generate a deep threat. Marcus Colston. What happened to Marcus Colston? I don't think he's a declining player, but this first quarter of the season, he's sure playing like it.
Well, I don't think age makes you alligator arm balls or drop passes, but it might have something to do with the fact that he has taken so many hits over the years, and maybe it's in his head now. Whenever he goes over the middle and he goes up to catch a pass, he might be thinking, God, I don't want to get hit anymore. But as for the other ones, the Saints wide receiving group used to be one of the highlights of their team, and now they really just can't do anything.
Shock and awe is dead.
Yeah.
But can it come back to life?
It can at any time.
You would think on paper it could.
And the reason why you think it can is because I think Brandon Cooks, a guy who was compared more to a Deshaun Jackson, a Steve Smith coming out of college, should be used more vertically. Give him a chance to make plays down the field. Kenny Stills provides some of that. They say he doesn't play up to his great time speed, but he's made plays down the field when he's been out there healthy. And you mentioned Morgan. How do you have him inactive? When even if he's not seeing too many balls, he's a guy who, like Devery Henderson, can stretch the field. People know how dangerous he is and can open up the middle for other people. I think that's one change that Sean Payton should really consider because, no offense to Robert Meacham, he's not that guy that complements the rest of that receiving corps.
Do the Saints rebound against Tampa Bay this weekend?
I definitely think so. I think Tampa Bay maybe is a little more dangerous than they thought after they're coming off this great win against Pittsburgh and they've got momentum. But the Saints at home, I think, are going to beat Tampa Bay and probably beat them pretty handily. I think it could be on par with last year. I know the Saints haven't really shown anything to prove that, but they're just the type of team that can just turn it on at any time. As bad as they've looked, if their offense can play as well at home as they have been before, I think that they'll be fine this week.
Tampa Bay's found a pulse with Mike Glennon at quarterback to go into Pittsburgh and win. I know their defense isn't what it used to be, but they've played well this year. That was impressive. He led them down the field late, clutch player. So you can't take them for granted considering any quarterback the Saints have faced, particularly close and late, has had success. But I think Catherine's right. They have to win this game, or you can start doing research for the 2015 draft. If they don't beat Tampa Bay, they're done. And I think they will. How impressively? Your guess is as good as mine. Again, 60 minutes. Right. Killer instinct. Are we going to see a 60-minute performance from the Saints to dominate, at least at home, like we know they're capable of doing?
866-3200 is the phone number. Jude Young of SportsNola.com. Katherine Terrell of the New Orleans Times-Picayune are our guests. Let's shift gears to the LSU Tigers. You're an alumnus of LSU. Of course, you cover LSU, Jude. Brandon Harris was named the starter this week. No disrespect, Stevie Wonder could have saw that. I mean, honestly. I mean, when you match up the two quarterbacks just on physical ability, obviously Harris is a guy that's got more physical ability. The team seems to rally around Harris. I was a little surprised, as we talked about before we opened, that Miles came out and announced it instead of leaving the Auburn coaching staff guessing. What are your thoughts on Harris? And going into SEC play, I think he's 188 pounds or so. He's going to be going up against some big boys when it comes to the Auburn Tigers and beyond. Been a concern of mine as far as him being physically ready to play, just from the wear and tear. But other than that, everything we've heard since spring is true. And even going back to Parkway High School, this kid is special. He could wind up being the most productive player at quarterback in the history of LSU football because he's got a chance now to start for almost a full 3 years, maybe 4, but he's got NFL talent. And the question is he ready? Well, he has to be because Anthony Jennings, he lost whatever edge he had to remain the starting quarterback, to be the steady choice with more experience in the system with what happened against Mississippi State. I think Harris's performance in the fourth quarter of that game, how the media and the fans reacted, it clearly affected him because New Mexico State, that's a bad football team, and he was miserable in that performance. But you're right, the team's play picked up. The first of the 7 straight touchdown drives Harris led, it was almost all running. LSU blocked better. They created more. Every player on the field started performing better. They want Harris as their quarterback, so he clearly has to be the guy.
You know, I covered LSU during the whole Jarrett Lee, Jordan Jefferson debacle, and it's very similar. Obviously, everyone knows Jarrett Lee was booed heavily, and it really took a toll on him. Actually, I think he said that to a reporter the other day, but you could just tell. He would freeze up and he would be lost, and it really messed him up mentally, I think. But I think maybe this is where Miles rights us wrong with the way he handled that situation. He stuck by Jordan Jefferson even though people wanted Lee, and I don't know that it was the right call. And
even after Lee played well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was the issue, and no one ever could figure that out. And I think maybe by giving Harris a chance, this is where you kind of change that. I mean, why not see what he can do? The kid's obviously got talent.
Yeah. You know, I've said it all along, and I'll continue to stand by it since the first game of the season, even before the season. This team will go as far as the offensive and defensive lines take them.
Right.
We saw a little chink in the armor against Wisconsin for 3 quarters. They put it together. We saw them dominated by Mississippi State. Auburn, obviously coming off that loss to LSU last year, they've got something to play for. They still believe they're a national championship contender. Again, you're going against a bona fide SEC lines on both sides of the ball with Auburn. Your thoughts on the offensive defensive lines? Because again, I think the skill positions, they got it.
Right.
Okay. Defensive backfield, they're darn good. Up front is where the tail of the tape will be told for this team going forward.
And on the offensive side, I'm not worried about the offensive line now that they have a quarterback who provides a true dual threat, who defenses are going to fear because he can make big plays. You mentioned the skill position talent. It is so young, but people are almost taking it for granted that they're going to perform well. 2 true freshmen, true sophomore, true freshman running back, true freshman quarterback, and people aren't worried about that.
They've been precocious.
Right, but these are all 5-star talents. They're supposed to be performing this well, but I think the offensive line will play fine. I like Ethan Posich taking over at right guard. I think that was the hole on the offensive line, and the rest are veterans who have been there, and they'll start to gel. I think they'll be fine. The defensive line, let's face it, LSU fans have been spoiled. There are no elite players on this defensive line.
That is a definite fact.
And John Chavis is not some dynamic defensive coordinator who's going to reinvent the wheel. He wants to have guys in the right places. He's going with a 4-man front for the most part, and he expects his defense to be in the right spots and athletes to make plays. He's not going to get a lot of that from this defensive line. So it's up to making sure the linebackers are more solid. Quan Alexander's a good player. They've got to get Kendall Beckwith at middle linebacker.
Yes.
They need to move forward with him. DJ Welter is a nice kid. He's a leader, but he's not an SEC talent at middle linebacker. And against teams like Auburn that spread the field, Welter had a nightmare against Mississippi State.
Exposed.
He was exposed on the one play for the touchdown, the long run that New Mexico State had, because if he takes one half misstep, he's not going to be able to recover. Beckwith was another of those 5-star guys. He needs to be on the field. They need to put their athletes in the right spots.
You know, Katherine, on the defensive side of the ball, I agree with Jude on the defensive line. We saw in the Wisconsin game more run blitzes, you know, and that kind of opened things up for them defensively. Your thoughts on the offensive defensive lines? Offensively, will we see more of a spread offense where you get Brandon Harris out on the edge instead of that I formation, pound it? I think they've got to do that. And then on defensive side, I think they've got to look at maybe more run blitzes, maybe being a little bit more exotic than the Chief maybe wants to be.
But the question is, will they do that? You know, Les Miles gets so stubborn, he just kind of sticks to his ways. You mentioned the I formation. I mean, he just likes it. Sometimes it just seems like he gets in a rut and wants to do the same thing over and over again. Maybe Brandon Harris will open this offense up. But, you know, I agree with everything y'all have said, but it's going to be tough against Auburn in more ways than one. I think that they're not going to lose like they did against Mississippi State again. I think they've learn from that, but they got a tough challenge coming up.
30 seconds. LSU wins or loses on Saturday?
Oh, as much as I would love to support my former team or former school, I don't think they're going to win. I think Auburn will beat them.
I think Auburn's going to win, but LSU will be in the game. They're about a 7-point underdog. They'll be in the game because Harris will make that offense go enough to make it a game into the fourth quarter.
Well, that'll be good because, again, any semblance of showing some dynamic offense where you're not going to be predictable with that eye is going to be good. And then we'll see what's going to happen on the defensive side of the ball. I surely hope these defensive line and offensive lines are up to the challenge, because I think that's going to be the way we'll look at this team for the whole season. At the end of the season, we'll look back and say, were they able to perform? Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Katherine, Terrell, Jude Young, we appreciate you guys being on the panel. And thanks so much for tuning in to Inside New Orleans Sports. Remember, there is a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night, 10 p.m. right here on WLAE-TV, and also Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. You can always catch me on the radio weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on WGSO 990 a.m. You can always also listen to my radio show or download my podcast at ericasher.com as well. And if you've missed any of the previous episodes of this program, Inside New Orleans Sports, you can check those out at ericasher.com. Special thanks again to Katherine Terrell of NOLA.com, and also Jude Young of SportsNOLA.com, and also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you right back here next week, 6 p.m. Have a great evening, and let's get a win.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.